Welcome to Beauty and the Beast, where we create a safe haven for Black men to engage in deep conversations and share their journeys in a judgment-free space.
In each episode, we dive into topics that matter, from identity and relationships to personal growth and resilience. This is a space where your story is valued, your voice is heard, and your journey is shared with others who, like you, may feel alone in the world.
Join us as we normalize conversations that are too often left unspoken and build a community rooted in support, understanding, and empowerment. Whether you're seeking connection, inspiration, or simply a place to be yourself, you're in the right place.
Through heartfelt storytelling and insightful dialogue, the podcast aims to dismantle stigma and foster a deeper understanding of the emotional landscapes navigated by Black men, ultimately highlighting the beauty that emerges from their journeys. Let's break the myth that Black men are beasts. I'm Maliik Baraka, leadership coach, skills trainer, workshop facilitator, and a man of the culture.
My name is Kyle Vaughn, University of Miami Hurricane, corporate leader, advocate for mental health, and movie producer. Welcome to Beauty and the Beast. Let's start the conversation.
Maliik, what's going on, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm excited to be here. How about yourself?
Very excited. Definitely ready to have a conversation with you, kind of share a little bit about myself, and because I think I'm gonna surprise you today.
Really? You think so?
I think I'm gonna surprise you today.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just go ahead and jump in. So we go back a few years. I know a little bit about you, so I'm not surprised that you're going to surprise me today.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it, actually. But I know you as a professional. I'm starting to get to know you way more on a personal level, even though I've known you on a personal level for many years. And I feel like this thing that we're doing right here has really brought us closer in a really short period of time. So, I've met your wife. I've seen you in professional settings. Starting to see you in not professional settings. And I admire you as a brother, as a Black man. But what I really want to start this conversation, where I want to start this conversation is kind of want you to tell us your story, your journey, like what brought you to where you are right now, your background, your childhood, what things inform who you are, to help people understand that we all have our own journeys. We all have our own ways of being, our own reasons for being. And all of those things are okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, kind of tell me and us, what has brought you to this place? Let's start at your childhood. Let's talk about your childhood a little bit and some of the things that have shaped you. And is it from an emotional standpoint, how that has shaped who you are as well?
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, bro. I appreciate, first of all, the energy and the desire for you to learn more, right? I think that where it starts for me is I would have to say born and raised in the county of Dade.
Absolutely. That's
right?
what we have in common.
I gotta start there. And being raised in Miami, Ghouls specifically, where I spent most of my formative years as a child, I think that's a huge part of what has provided a foundation for me, from which I've been able to build on in so many ways with so many people. From a heritage perspective, my people are Cuban, Bahamian, and Caymanian. Caymanian from the Caymans.
Got it.
Yeah. My father specifically was an immigrant from Cuba. There's both Cuban and Bahamian and the Canadian on my mother's side.
So you fit right in Miami then?
Fit right in Dade. Fit right in. And but what's interesting about it is, although that's in my background, it wasn't in the forefront of my childhood.
So you don't speak Spanish then?
Don't speak Spanish, and grew up with very limited knowledge about those cultures.
Why is that?
The way it showed up for me was in food. But my My understanding now as a grown man is that, specifically when my father and his mother and grandmother and brother came over, they were trying to integrate with
You mean assimilate?
American Black culture. Well, they were trying to integrate, but what they were doing was assimilate.
Gotcha.
Right? And so a lot of that language, a lot of that history was lost in translation to how they grew up, and then subsequently through the limited amount of interactions I had with my father throughout his lifetime. That was never something that was imparted upon me either.
So you just touched on something relative to your father. Yeah. So let's kind of dive deep on that point. So you said your limited interactions with your father. So let's talk about that a little bit. And how did that shape you emotionally?
It was limited because he and my mother conceived me in Key West, because my mother was living in Key West at the time, and obviously so was he. And then once she got pregnant with me, she left Key West and went back to Miami. So I grew up in Miami without him, and I would see him, every few summers. It wasn't consistently year after year, but the occasional summers, and during that time in the summer was the most exposure I had to him. So my huge influence was that from my mother, obviously a single mother for most of my life.
Were a lot of your peers similar?
In the projects that I grew up in, very much so. Not a lot of two-parent households, mostly single moms, and it was like most projects, it was a challenging environment, resources limited, opportunities limited, but love was bountiful, right? We made the most of what we had.
Gotcha.
And for the most part, most people didn't understand that we were impoverished because we only knew this style of life, right? It wasn't until I went not off to school, but bused to school, because I was bused to a predominantly white elementary school. So then interacting with, non-Black kids of different
them folks,
right? Them folks. But it wasn't just white, right? Like it might have been Indian, or it might have been whomever, Asian kid, brown kids, what have you. It wasn't until I was then in conversations and situations with those kids, and then eventually had the opportunity to do a sleepover one night at one of my white friends' house, that I got to really see how different our lifestyles were, our upbringings and our home lives were.
So I want to go back on something, because there's a part of the question you didn't delve into, and that was the emotional impact of having limited interaction to your father. How do you think that shaped you and your way of being as an adult?
Yeah. I think it had a huge impact, and the emotional impact itself kind of varied over the years. As a very young child, I didn't know what I was missing out on, and I didn't really have expectations, because for me, this was the format, right? This was the plan. So when I saw him, I saw him. When I didn't, I didn't. Like, that's just how it was.
Gotcha.
So I never really existed in a emotional space of wanting or lack as it pertained to him. But what did happen as I got older, and I had the opportunity during like my junior year of high school to go and live with him, things changed radically from there.
How so?
So what I didn't know upon venturing 3,000, no, that's not 3, that's like 6,000 miles across the country. Yeah. Check my math later. What I didn't know was that I was traveling via Greyhound for 3 days on a bus by myself to go live with my father, who was struggling with addiction.
Dang. All right.
So throughout, I would say I was 15 when I discovered this. It was something that was going on unbeknownst to me years prior to that. And it was on and off throughout the duration of his life until he passed about maybe 7 or so years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah. And what that created was this dynamic of one, endearment to him. Because when I found out, he was like, hey, I'm in rehab. Got a call when I got home from school. I'm dealing with this. I'm hoping that this doesn't cause you to leave. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be there for you.
So let me two things. One is, so you said it created an endearment.
Mm-hmm.
So that sounds like there was an opposite feeling until that point.
It's not that there was an opposite feeling. There was an absence of feeling prior to that. I was indifferent prior to that. And then it was like, okay, now he's expressing this desire for me to be supportive of him, to believe in him, and for us to build a bond greater than we had ever had before. So then it was like, I'm leaning in. Yes, let's do it.
Gotcha.
But then, as time transpired, he came out of rehab. Lots of rockiness, during that period, up until the point to where he finally admitted to me that, the reason that all the money you're giving me is not going towards the bills. Why we have?
Wait. How old were you paying bills? Wait.
This was 15.
Okay.
This was 15. Actually, I was 15 when I got there, and then I turned 16 while I was there. So 16, I'm working an after school job, playing sports, holding school down, obviously, and trying to acclimate to this whole new environment on the other side of the country. Only person I know when I get out there is him.
Wow. So
I'm acclimating to that. I'm getting my rhythm. Like I said, I'm working, and as I'm working, he's like, well, hey, I need help with this bill. I need help with that. So I'm kicking in, making sure that things are tight at the household. And so when I finally got to the place where he admitted to me that the reason that me helping with bills still wasn't keeping the lights on, still wasn't keeping food in the refrigerator, that I was still having to rely on the after school job I worked to feed myself, to then for him to admit like, well, yeah, all of this has been happening because I'm back on drugs. What I felt as far as that endearment quickly shifted to anger.
Resentment?
Rage.
Okay.
Like so many emotions that I couldn't name at the time.
Got it.
At that time, I was just an angry, volatile kid and didn't even realize it. And so then when I left Cali and I made my way back to Miami, I came back very different. I came back emotionally scarred, and I came back, traumatized in a way that, again, I couldn't name, I couldn't interpret. I didn't understand.
What comes to mind, right, is a lot of times when we're going through traumatic things, especially at that age, we feel alone.
Sure.
Right. And I'm sure there may be others who are maybe listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, who have gone through some traumatic experiences as a child.
Word.
How did you evolve relative to that experience in your life? Like, how did you get to a point where you could name the rage? I mean, because I'm sure it took years, right? So I don't suspect that you graduate and now you're like, oh, I'm better now. Like, where'd you get to that? How'd you get to that point?
There were two seminal moments for me. The first was becoming a father. When I became a father, so much of that anger that I carried towards him immediately was released. because what I understood when I became a father was I didn't miss out on having a dad so much as he missed out on this wonderful experience that I'm now endeavoring upon. Right? Like, it was the dopest shit in the world for me to see this little boy come into the world and know that, one, this was partly my creation, but two, so much my responsibility.
So I don't want to rush you, but what was that second seminal moment?
The second seminal moment was when I started going to therapy. That's 2A. 2B is when I started going to couples therapy. And in those two spaces, I was able to identify and name and get the tools for managing so much. A lot of things I was able to identify and release. A lot of things I was able to identify and better manage, right? Because some things you can get rid of, some things leave scars, and those scars will heal, but you're still going to have a scar.
All right, man. So, okay, you hit me with some heavy stuff. Some of it I knew, some of it I didn't.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to pivot a little bit. But before we do that, let's take a pause. All right, man. So we've talked about single parenthood. We've talked about drug addiction. We have talked about seminal moments in our lives. We've talked about childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Right?
Some shit.
Very heavy shit.
Yeah.
So again, I don't necessarily want to rush you, but I want the audience to understand that these are things that a lot of people go through, may not go through in the same way. But you talked about kind of those two seminal moments of fatherhood for yourself and therapy, right? So before we really delve into the therapy part, I kind of want to pause on that one because we'll get to it later. But in terms of you becoming a father, so before we go into the fatherhood aspect and you becoming a father, like we got to a point when you talked about childhood and you talked about making it back to Miami.
Right.
So there's a lot of hardship and trauma, like I just said, but you went to college, right? So what's that transitional period and how do you make the decision and make up your mind that I need to do some shit with myself? Regardless of the experiences I've had as a child. So how did you get to that place?
I think what happened for me is I came back with all that anger, like I said.
Yep.
I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to do with it. And the way it manifested itself was when I came back for my senior year in Miami, I was a Hellcat, bro. Like,
what you mean by Hellcat? What the hell that mean,
bro? Like, I was giving teachers the fucking blues. Like, I got into it with teachers. I got suspended from class. I got, I didn't want to be a part of anything. So I didn't go to grad night. I didn't go to prom. I didn't go to graduation. I was like, fuck all that, bro.
Goddamn, son.
Yeah. Like, because for me, I was in a mental and emotional place where I had outgrown the constrictiveness of that environment. And I even considered going and just getting my GED. Now, mind you, I was an honor student the whole time. Right. Like, I was in the top 10 percentile of my class, of my graduating class. But instead of doing all those things kind of align with other people's expectations, I ended up going to summer school to graduate because I was failing 2 classes.
What classes were those?
Prior to that time, I had always wanted to be pre-law. I was going to be a lawyer. It was a big deal for me. Senior year, I'm failing English and government. The main 2 classes. The 2 instructors for those classes both kind of had a huddle with me in the vice principal's office and was like, hey, look, man, we know you're smart. We know you can do the work. If you take these tests, we'll pass you with these so you can graduate on time and be done with all of this. My angry ass was like, no, I'll go to summer school. I'm not taking your D's. So I did. I went to summer school. I took both of the classes, obviously got A's in summer school, but then I stepped into the gap year. And so now I'm just kind of buoyant. And because I didn't go right off to school.
So I was just about to say,
I didn't go right off to school.
So do you think at some point you were headed down the path of becoming a statistic, or you were just like, no, fuck this. I just don't know what I want to do with my life?
Oh, I was absolutely headed down the path of becoming a statistic because, one, again, the emotional baggage, right? The trauma I'm carrying.
Right.
2, this is during the Gulf War recession, so nobody was hiring.
We old as fuck.
And so 3, I had people that were affiliated with a lot of things that wasn't so savory, right? And I'm like, okay, I got to get my money up.
Okay, no. I'm not going to let you escape that shit. Like, what you mean by not so savory? What the hell that mean?
Hey, man.
I mean, we being vulnerable and shit.
I know there's statutes of limitations and all that good shit, but what I'll just say is I was connected with some people that may or may not have been engaged in some street pharmaceutical activity.
Okay. All right.
And I thought that as an enterprising young man, I could be a sales rep.
All right. Well, we don't need to delve into. Okay, I got you. I fully understand. That's not what this podcast is about. So let's move on from that shit because we can spend a whole lot of time on that.
1000%. So because I was protected. Because I was protected, and they were like, "Nah, this ain't for you, bro." So you the schoolboy.
Who protected you?
Friends and family. Friends and family who were affiliated with that lifestyle.
Gotcha.
They were like, "Nah, this ain't for you," and that was something that I really experienced throughout my childhood, where I was around a lot of street dudes, and I was a hood dude, but I was never a street dude. Right. And so the street dudes that I was cool with kept me protected and kept me away from that lifestyle.
You know what? What I find interesting about that, right, is so you think about the world at large, especially in this country, there's a perception of street dudes and who they are and what they're about. But what I hear you saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, is there were people in your life who may be unsavory in the activities that they partake in to make money, but they were good dudes from the aspect of they recognized and saw something in you, and they were trying to motivate you to take a different path. Is that correct?
Absolutely that, man. You know, it's kind of like I said earlier, it's a lot of love in the hood, man. It's a lot of love in the hood. It just don't always look and feel like some shit you could put on TV, like something you could put in a Hallmark card. But there's a lot of love in the hood, and out of love, these cats was like, "Nah, schoolboy, this ain't you. You go off to college. You do your thing. You don't need to be affiliated with this." Because they knew that I had other choices, but also what they knew was I was too kind for that lifestyle.
Oh, wait. Okay. Wait, hold on now. Because you and I both know, and we'll talk about me later, but you and I both know that kindness can get your ass killed in Miami. So how is that even a thing for you?
When you say how's that even a thing for me,
how did they recognize? So you're talking about hood dudes.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something else, but I'm not going to use that word on this podcast. But hood dudes recognizing that you have kindness in you. That's not what you think of when you think of the cats that we grew around with. So how did they find kindness in you and recognize that it was okay for you to be that?
I think that one, that was not their language. That is my language as an adult, right?
Gotcha.
It was, bro, you nice, right? Not necessarily you ain't soft,
Right.
but you nice. And there's not a lot of room in this game to be nice.
So in other words, you get your ass killed.
You gonna mess around and you gonna fuck around and get your ass killed. Yeah, exactly. Like, so you don't need to play in this life because you don't have to play in this life.
Got it.
You can play over here and be perfectly fine.
All right. Got it. Okay. All right. So get it. So now you decide I'm going to college.
So I'm at home in that gap year. I'm not able to find anything, and I finally land a job in a Mexican restaurant as a dishwasher.
Okay, did not know this. All right.
Right. So I'm busting suds in the back of this restaurant, and just kind of reflecting on who I am and all these dreams and aspirations that I've had my whole childhood, and to now be out of high school with to be this so-called gifted kid and honors kid and AP kid and all these things.
You were one of them gifted kids?
I was one of them.
Fuck you.
I was one of them.
They would never accept me into the gifted program, but that's a whole other story.
That's a whole nother story. That's what's happened to your trauma later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Because of that, I'm sitting there day in and day out like, this can't be life. This can't be where I'm supposed to be right now. And so then, by virtue of a childhood friend that I had, maintained connection with, who had went off to school, they were like, hey, come here with me, man. Like, it's good here. I think you'll appreciate it. That's the only school that I applied to. And this was, by Florida State, by record.
Yeah.
And so that was the only school that I applied to. So I went off to Tallahassee.
Goddamn Seminoles.
Hey, man.
You're going to find out why I hate y'all motherfuckers later.
First of all, what we're not going to do is call me y'all. Yeah. Because I'm Miami Hurricane through and through. I bleed orange and green, baby. That was where I received the diploma. That was never where my heart was.
That goddamn chop bullshit.
I never chopped.
All right. We move on. Yeah. Okay. So, all right, you're in college, and there's a story I would love for you to tell that you've told me a couple times about when you realized that you could be nice, you could be kind. So, like, when walking on that campus, I'd love for you to regale that story about your first experience of running into people who weren't like us.
Right. And it's interesting the way you phrased it, to say people who weren't like us, because as we've talked about before, in Miami, there's just this energy, I think like in like a lot of big cities, we idle high. Right. We idle high. And in addition to that, we mind our business.
I like that phrase. We idle high.
Yeah. We mind our business. And so I remember, walking across the campus, investigating where my classes were, so that I knew exactly where they might be, and I wouldn't have to search for them on the day of, so I wouldn't be late to class, because that's the way that my OCD is wired, because I'm on the spectrum, right? And as I'm seeking out these classes, I see this dude walking towards me, white dude. He's walking towards me. I'm not looking at him, but I see him because situational awareness at all times. Yep. So he gets close enough to me where he's in earshot, and he was like, hey, how you doing today? And I look around. I'm like, bro, who the fuck you talking to?
Did he run?
He didn't, but it was just, his face was terrified. And I'm like, what's your angle, bro? And he's just quiet. So I just smooth off, like, yeah, man, don't come at me with that shit, because I had been socialized to understand that you don't speak to people you don't know. You don't look at people you don't know. You mind your business. Because if you don't, it can get you killed.
You ain't said nothing but a word.
Yeah. So I arrived there with that mentality. after being there for a while, I started changing. Quite honestly, I started getting a little soft. But I didn't realize that.
Soft ass.
You're right. I didn't realize that was happening till I went back home.
Hold on. I want to introduce a phrase, and I won't use the whole thing, but you were a pussy ass.
Yeah.
That's what we used to say in Miami.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's interesting that you bring that reference up, because what I quickly started to discover was in my change, this transformation was bringing on things or revealing things about what I had been hiding and what I didn't even know was there. And how those things were counterintuitive to so many of the survival skills that I had learned back home.
All right. So you're at FSU. Mm-hmm. I almost threw up in my mouth saying the word. You're at FSU. You're changing. And one of the things you told me is you didn't realize you were changing until you went home.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got that dynamic going on. So let's fast forward. You graduate, right? Real quick. What's your degree in?
English and sociology, minor in Black studies.
Oh, okay. All right. Militant ass.
Yeah. 1,000%.
All right. So you graduate, right? Let's fast forward. You're a man, right? And you talked about fatherhood. Yeah. And that was a seminal moment for you. Right. That allowed you to release a lot of the anger that you had towards your pops. Right. So let's transition into married life, corporate life, fatherhood. And I'll let you pick any of those three that you want to delve into. But what I really want to get at in any of those three that you talk about is now as a grown man with a child, how are you showing up emotionally?
So as a man, as a husband and as a father, right? I'll start there with my first marriage. My first marriage happened because of my son. Full transparency, I call that marriage the pilot program.
Okay.
Right? Because that was the marriage in which I learned about marriage. Prior to that marriage, I really hadn't seen a healthy marriage model in real life, which is why I took so many cues from Heathcliff Huxtable.
Okay.
About being a husband and a father.
Dr. Huxtable.
Dr. Huxtable, right? Very different person than Bill Cosby. Let's not get it fucked up.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Heathcliff, that's still my guy.
Yeah, to this day. For sure.
And that marriage failed as I knew it might, because we were never that compatible to begin with, to enter in a lifelong commitment.
So you got married thinking it might not work?
1,000%.
Okay.
1,000%. Because for me, it wasn't about how deeply I loved this individual or how deeply this individual loved me. It was, we need to create a nuclear family for our son because he deserves that.
Got it. Fair.
And so let's fucking figure it out. And we figured it out as far as we could until we couldn't. So then that eventually dissolves. And again, I'm walking away with some bitterness out of that relationship because it could have dissolved a lot better than it did.
Gotcha.
A lot healthier than it did. Let me say it that way.
Understood.
So now I'm single dad. And in my mind, now I'm tapping back into my mom's methodology of this is how mom rolled for me and my younger brother as single mom. I'm single dad now. The same way that we were the center of her universe, now he's the center of my universe.
You're modeling what you saw.
I'm modeling what I saw, to a degree, but I'm upgrading that model in my mind.
Gotcha.
What I didn't realize at the time, because I wasn't aware enough, nor had the understanding or tools to understand was, at that point, I started hiding behind my kid.
Okay. All right.
By elevating his needs and what I wanted to provide for him over everything, I was able to hide my shit, not deal with my own trauma, not prioritize myself in any way. He became a shield inadvertently.
So do you think that a lot of Black men hide behind this notion of being a provider?
Absolutely.
So why do you think that is? And of course we're not therapists, and so I'm not asking you to therapize about it, but for your personal experience, why do you think that is?
I think that at our core, we want to be good. We want to be righteous. And we want to connect to the things that we feel are the right things to do to be a fucking stand-up guy. I think that what we have seen in our environments and our community is this is what a real man does, right? Like there's this notion of what a real man is. Yep. And a real man takes care of his kids. A real man provides for his family. A real man doesn't cry. A real man, the list goes on and on.
All the things you don't do, and yet we don't have a list of what you do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fair.
And so because I was following that program, then everything, like I said, that I needed to deal with about myself, I didn't. And so as a result, I brought that into my second marriage. And it wasn't until I started going into therapy and then couples therapy that I was able to start dealing with those things.
Similar moment number 2.
Yes, sir.
So how has therapy... So actually, before we even go there, what gave you the courage to go down that path? Because, at least in my community, only crazy people go to therapy.
Yeah.
So what gave you that?
Your crazy ass.
Really? Say more.
So, you may recall in the midst of our conversations, which started about how to navigate the corporate landscape, right? Like I'm getting game from you. I'm getting these gems from you about this how you can move in these rooms full of snakes. And then it kind of started transcending work conversations to home conversations. And in the home conversations, I'm sharing things with you. And I'm sure in your brain, you was like, this brother might need to talk to somebody.
Yes, absolutely. I was like, this Negro need to go seek some professional help.
Yeah, 1,000.
But that's not something you just dive into. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah. And so I think that by virtue of me trusting you and your perspective more and more and hearing how impactful therapy had been for you, when you made the recommendation to me to see this therapist that you think I could have a good conversation with, I trusted that.
Yeah, but dude, you trusted a hell of a lot.
I did, man. I did, because for me, I'm big on the energy that I feel from people. Like even before, the idea of that was in vogue and people started using that language, even before I had that language accessible to me, like that spirit of discernment, that intuition, that sense of connecting with people, like that's always been there for me, even before I could name it. And so when I connect with people and like when I tell people that I really fuck with them, like I fuck with them. But also if I don't fuck with you, I don't fuck with you at all. Like that's I've been wired that way since childhood. And so being able to connect with you in a way that made it feel as if you were truly in my corner, as if you truly had my best interest at heart. And by virtue of that, you were willing to share of yourself and be vulnerable with me in that way of, man, this is shit I've been dealing with. And this is how I've been managing it. You might want to think about this.
Yep.
It gave me the confidence I needed.
All right. Okay. All right. So that's how we met.
Yeah.
So there you go. But you talked earlier about the fact that you didn't have the words to express how you were feeling through trauma that you experienced. So are you saying to me therapy helped you develop that vocabulary? And if that's what you're saying, how so?
Therapy, yes, I am absolutely saying that and more. I'm saying that therapy helped me develop the vocabulary. It helped me to look inward. It gave me the courage to be brave in the face of the fear that I was experiencing. And it gave me the tools to help me navigate these things internally that are in me, that are surrounding me, et cetera. And it was hard as fuck. It was one of the hardest things
Amen.
That I ever did, bro, because it's one thing to go and conquer someone standing in front of you, or conquer, getting this degree, or conquer getting this job, or whatever the thing is that is external. But trying to excavate through your shit and find this thing that you have to conquer within yourself, shit's hard, bro. And it is a job that there's no finish line for it.
Man, who you telling?
Yeah.
So, all right, this podcast, by now everybody knows, is called Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a couple questions that we want to ask each of our guests. And right now you're the guest, right? And, you and I have talked about this, and relative to the title, what are your thoughts on the concept that the world sees Black men as beasts?
Shit, we could fill a fucking podcast with just that question alone, bro. Suffice to say that I think it's bullshit. I think it's intentional. I think it was part of a grander design in order to create fear about the Black man and to continue to monetize the Black man's labor, but also the Black man's talent, and to keep the Black man under control.
Some deep shit. Yeah. All right. Okay. So now let's juxtapose that. At what point in your life did you or others around you realize the beauty that you are in this world?
I think that I was fortunate enough to grow up with a lot of love in and outside of my household. And although that love might not have always looked and felt the way that I wanted it to, I recognize as a grown-ass man now that it was there. And I think that specific to Blackness, I think for me, I kind of took off after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. And that was the first thing that I accessed that I felt that gave me the language of revolt, the language of pride, and the language of to unpack this sinister, diabolical plan that was at play, of how we were being mislabeled, of how we were being misused. And then from there, I was able to start reprogramming myself to understand how beautiful Black is, how beautiful Black men are, and to be able to speak, at least internally before even externally, to speak to, this is bullshit and we gonna move different.
Nice. All right. So I have, what we will be doing with each of our guests. I have a little present from your wife.
Oh, shit.
So she has graciously provided me with her experiences of you throughout your journey. Yeah. So I'll read that.
All right. Hold on.
You ready?
Let me get ready.
All right. My husband is a man defined by his evolution. Someone who has embraced self-love, emotional growth, and the power of vulnerability to become the best version of himself. Our friends and family have called him many names: the brain, Professor, Majesus, yes, Majesus, and my personal favorite, asshole from the bench. Whatever the name, our close-knit circle would not be the people we are without his mentorship, guidance, and wisdom. Maliik was raised by a single mom who instilled the value of love, hard work, and loyalty in him and his younger brother. He was the three of them against the world. Yes, you heard that right. He was the three of them against the world, the three musketeers, growing up in Miami, Florida, where abundance was measured in material things and anger and happiness were deemed the only acceptable emotions. I have witnessed him being intentional about unlearning much of what he once believed about success and fulfillment. Through deep introspection and emotional intelligence, he has transformed into a stronger father, husband, and friend, proving that healing is not just necessary, but liberating. I admire his self-work ethic. He understands that you can't grow or you can't take care of others if you don't prioritize your star power. He often says his purpose is simple: to help the most people in the most profound way possible, which he has been doing long before he even realized it. He taught grade school, shaping young minds and guiding them towards knowledge and self-discovery. Built a career in talent acquisition, helping people find career opportunities aligned with their aspirations. And now he is walking in his full purpose with authenticity, unleashed coaching. Needless to say, he always finds a way to uplift others. Beyond his professional impact, he finds joy in making people happy in more tangible ways through food. I would put his brisket in a barbecue competition among the best. He's mostly a self-taught cook, although he refined his skills further by attending culinary school, which we didn't even talk about. I did not know that. Cooking is more than just a hobby for him. It's an expression of love, a way to bring people together, and yet another avenue through which he spreads joy. While he thrives in creating happiness for others, he knows that his identity extends far beyond that. And I honestly think what brings him the most joy is our kids, both 23 years old. He has a parenting style that blends the wisdom and strength of Furious Styles from Boys in the Hood with the warmth and humor of Heathcliff Huxtable from The Cosby Show. He balances discipline with fairness, authority with affection, and lots of laughter. A whole lot of laughter, literally all capital letters. If you have the pleasure of being invited into his circle, you know he is super silly and unserious. When he's not guiding, inspiring, or feeding the people around him, you can find him fully immersed in one of the reasons why I love this dude, in his passion for Miami Hurricanes football, a love that runs deep and unwavering. Or adding an endless amount of sneakers to various online carts that eventually make this way into the sneaker closet. Eyes roll here.
All right, relax, girl.
His journey has been an honor to witness, a true statement to the power of self-awareness, transformation, and purpose. And as he continues forward, one thing is certain: his future is boundless, and his impact will only continue to grow. He's my bestie for life, my protector, my safe place. Love his dirty draws. So, brother, I will say that your wife sees your beauty and has never seen you as a beast. And with that, we're out.